My dad chose my cousin over me, funded his future and ruined mine, but karma left him drowning in regret as I built my own life. I never imagined that I would be sharing this story, but here I am. I'm a 28-year-old man who has had a rather difficult life, particularly when it comes to family. My mother passed away while giving birth to me, which I suppose set the tone for the relationship I had with my father. He never really moved past her death and always treated me as if I were the reason she was gone. Naturally, I have no memories of my mother, but I've heard many stories from relatives about how thrilled she was to have me. She had always longed to become a mother and had faced years of fertility struggles before finally conceiving me. This knowledge only makes the whole situation more heartbreaking. She finally achieved her dream, only to have it tragically cut short. As I was growing up, our home was filled with photographs of my mother. My father kept everything just as she had left it, almost as if the house were a shrine to her memory. Her clothes remained hanging in the closet, and her books still lined the shelves. It felt as though I was living with the ghost of a woman I would never have the chance to know. Sometimes, I would sneak into their room just to touch her belongings, trying desperately to forge some sort of connection with the mother I never met. My relationship with my father, however, was entirely different. He was there in the physical sense, but emotionally, he might as well have been on a different planet. He went through the basic motions of parenting, ensuring that I was fed, clothed and made it to school on time, but there was never any warmth or affection. No hugs, no words of love, not even a simple pat on the back for a job well done. I always felt like an outsider within my own home. Most days my father would barely even look at me, let alone engage in conversation. When he did speak to me, it was usually to criticize or compare me to my cousin Jake. Jake's father, my uncle, died in a car accident when Jake was 7, so my father kinda took him under his wing. I still remember the day we received the news about my uncle's death. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon, and I was sitting at the kitchen table, working on homework, when the phone rang. My father answered, and I watched as his face crumpled while he listened to whoever was on the other end of the line. That was the first and only time I ever saw my father cry. After hanging up the phone, he sat down heavily at the table and stared off into space for what felt like hours. Jake began to spend a lot more time at our house after that. I was excited at first. I thought that having another kid around might make things more fun and might even help my dad open up a bit. But it didn't take me long to understand that Jake's presence made my relationship with my dad even worse. He often asked, "Why can't you be more like Jake?" Or Jake would never do that. It seemed like Jake was the son he had always wanted and I was just there. Jake was sporty, friendly, and charming, which I wasn't. Jake was the life of the party, while I was shy and liked to read. It was delicious for my dad. I worked really hard to make my dad happy. It never seemed like enough. I tried to learn about his interests, got good grades and joined every sports team. My dad thought Jake could never do a bad thing. He would compliment Jake on the smallest things, but I never got any credit for my own accomplishments. I won a science fair at school when I was about 12 years old. My project was a complicated model of the solar system that could move. I worked on it for weeks. I could hardly wait to tell my dad. I thought this would finally make him happy. His laughter and talk with Jake about a football game made me laugh when I got home. I told him I won, but he just nodded and went back to talking to Jake. It felt like I wasn't there at all. It gets worse as we age because of the bias. People always made fun of Jake and me because we were in the same grade. I did better in school than Jake did in high school, but my dad would always find ways to downplay my achievements. "Well, Jake's got more important things to think about than just grades," he would say. During one parent-teacher meeting, my English teacher raved about an essay I'd written. She told my dad it was one of the best papers she had ever seen from a kid my age and that she thought I would make a great writer. My dad just grunted and asked if this would help me get a big grant for sports. The teacher looked confused, and I was so embarrassed that my face burned. In spite of this, there remained a part of me that still yearned for changes. I reasoned that perhaps everything would be fine if only I could locate the appropriate thing, the magic key unlocking my dad's adoration. I pursued that unattainable dream all of my childhood and during my teenage years. When it came time for college, the true kickback was I had pushed my ass, enrolled at a decent university and been ready to launch my future. Though I knew money would be limited, I reasoned my dad would contribute at least somewhat. Boy, I guess I was mistaken. The day I overheard my dad on the phone with Jake informing him he would pay for his whole college tuition will always be with me. My pulse dropped. My dad looked at me like I was insane when I asked if he could also assist me out. "Jake needs it more than I can afford to pay for both of you," he remarked. That's exactly how my college dreams vanished. I attempted to make it work nevertheless. Working evenings and weekends, I had a part-time job at a nearby diner. I applied for every scholarship I could locate, but it was not enough. The strain was intolerable. I was juggling my classes, working enough hours to pay for things and still finding time to study and sleep. There has to be a give. After the first semester I found myself having to drop out. On my own, I couldn't afford it. The part-time work I could find hardly covered tuition. Jake was living it at a famous university, completely on my dad's money, meanwhile. He would share images of his elegant dorm room, his spring break travels, the new laptop my dad had purchased for him for college on social media. Every post was like a knife turning in my gut. That moment was the breaking point for me. I gathered my belongings and left home, cutting off all contact with both my father and Jake. It was incredibly painful, but I knew I had to escape that toxic environment. I could no longer bear to live in the shadow of my deceased mother and the cousin who had somehow replaced me in my father's heart. The past few years have been challenging, to say the least. I've taken on various odd jobs, doing whatever I could to make ends meet. I've waited tables, worked in construction, pulled night shifts at gas stations, anything to ensure I had a roof over my head and food to eat. It has been difficult, especially when I see updates from Jake on social media about his incredible college experiences and the great job he secured after graduation. But despite everything, I'm gradually building a life for myself on my own terms. I now have a decent job, not something extravagant, but it covers the bills. I'm working as a manager at a local bookstore. It's not the career I envisioned, but I find solace in being surrounded by books all day. In addition, I'm taking night classes at the community college, working toward the degree I've always wanted. It's not an easy journey, but at least I'm making it on my own. Along the way, I've made some great friends, people who accept me for who I am, not for who they want me to be. They have become the family I never truly had. We have weekly game nights, go on camping trips when we can afford it, and support each other through thick and thin. It's far from perfect, but it's mine, and that makes all the